Hello guys, Nate Bailey here with the Life Outdoors and Barebow Hunter. And today we're going to talk about arrow penetration and the 12 big things that either help the penetration or impede it. So stay tuned.
We ask this in your holy of holy names, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
So I have noticed that there's a big influx of people coming into bow hunting, and a lot of people coming over from rifle hunting into bow hunting, and a lot of those ideas that work for rifle hunters don't work in the bow hunting world. And so I thought it would be great to make this video to try to help everybody kind of understand what bow hunting is as far as how we kill the animals, how we dispatch the animals compared to rifle hunting. And there are 12 big things that affect your effectiveness of the arrow that you're using or the equipment that you're using. Now, before we do that, let's talk a little bit of the differences between rifle hunting and bow hunting as far as what you're trying to accomplish each time you either pull the trigger or let an arrow fly. So with a rifle, you are trying to, of course, you want to get penetration to enter the body cavity, but at the same time, you're trying to dissipate all of the energy within that bullet inside that body cavity, or as it's going through the body cavity, even if it's poking a hole out the other side. The biggest thing that you're not trying to get a good blood trail. That's not what you're really after with a rifle. You want to actually dissipate all that energy and shock the animal to death. That's what you're trying to accomplish with a rifle. Now with a bow, it's a completely different thing. What you're trying to do is you're not trying to induce shock into an animal. You're trying to stick a hole through an animal and cut as many arteries as you can, basically, and try to collapse lungs or try to take out the heart or any kind of big vessels within that body cavity. And so it usually takes a little bit of a longer it's not a energy dissipation type kill. You're actually going to either bleed them out or collapse lungs or make it to where they can't pump blood any further. So you have to get rid of that. When you come over from a rifle, you got to get rid of that, because we no longer look at foot-pounds of energy. We don't care. We don't care how many foot-pounds of energy your arrow's carrying. What we do care about is how much momentum it's carrying, and how much and how that momentum's being used. So that's the biggest difference between the two. So try to get that out of your mind. One of the other things is back in the early days, you saw a lot of people trying to shoot lighter arrows to get their speeds up, and it's kind of a rifle thing. It's kind of guys coming over from the rifle scene because they want to have a flatter trajectory for longer distances. They don't have to have pin gaps, and they don't have to guess yardages. Guessing your yardages is critical. But the fact of the matter is that is not what bow hunting should be about. We shouldn't worry about this light arrow trajectories and things like that, because bow hunting was designed, it always has been, it always will be, close in game. I don't care if you're shooting a 300 feet per second arrow, foot per second arrow, or a 200 foot per second arrow. You're not going to beat the reaction times of any animal. So the fact that you think that you're gonna, by shooting a faster arrow, you're gonna get a cleaner shot, that is not the case. That most of the time, that is not the case. The only thing that it does provide you is a flatter trajectory does provide you to shoot out further, and maybe the animal doesn't know you're there. So that is one advantage that a flat trajectory does provide. It also provides better accuracy, but when you look at anything from 30 yards under, 30 yards to you, your trajectory really isn't a matter of, quite honestly, most of you compound guys could shoot one pin to 30 yards. And all of us trad guys, you know, depending on how we're shooting to 30 yards, we don't have to adjust a lot in our shot to 30 yards as far as once we start getting on the bottom end of that arc on the arrow, that's when we have to start adjusting and shooting gaps or shooting whatever else. I just don't shoot it, but a lot of guys that are shooting gaps, or they're shooting all sorts of different aiming methods out past 30 yards. But so with that said, these are the things that we need to talk about when you guys come over to bow hunting. And I think there's a big misconception out there. I think with the popularity of bow hunting becoming such a big thing, that a lot of people are looking at their speeds and looking at kinetic energy and things like that, when what they really should be looking at is how to set up their arrow properly and how to get closer to the animal. I know that's not going to sit well with some guys, and some people are going to say, well, I could shoot my bow better than you could shoot yours. I could shoot my bow at 50 yards better than you could shoot yours at 25, and they're probably right. But what I'm saying is even if they're shooting theirs at 50 yards, if they're shooting a better arrow, when something does go wrong, that arrow will still probably do its job, and you might recover that animal. Now, 2020, the last time I went elk hunting, I got a horrible shot on an elk, and I'm going to show you that footage right here. Right here. But as that bull was coming in, he came in straight on. I called him across. He was raking when I snuck up on him, and I snuck up on him while he was raking, and he was probably 10 yards out, and I called him through this jack pine thicket, and he's coming straight at me, and he was only about probably 5 yards at me when he was facing me straight on. And I probably should have shot him frontal, but I didn't because I was afraid he was going to run me over if I shot him frontal, actually. So as he came through, I waited for him to make that one turn, because he saw me as he came through, and he didn't know what I was, but he wasn't afraid of me. But he didn't want to be around me either at the same time, so he kind of just turned. And as I saw him make that turn and put that front forward, I was already at draw as he's coming through, but as he came through and I saw him put that front forward, I shot. And by the time that he made that complete shot, I actually hit him in the back. And it was way far back. It was a horrible shot. And to this day, I think if I wasn't shooting the arrow setup that I chose, I don't think I would have got that bull. I would have killed it with any arrow. I just don't think I would have been able to get him. And as it was, we had to give him plenty of time and go back in and get him. But I think if it wasn't for that arrow setup, I would have been in a world of hurt. And the reason I say that is because, as you guys are looking at it right now, the reason I say that is because that arrow went all the way through, broke the opposite side ball joint, and essentially made that elk slow down. He had to go bed. He had to, because I broke that whole back hip. And to do that with a 50, well, I was drawing about 53 pounds, shooting 140 feet per second, but I was shooting a 650 grain arrow. That is the difference here, and the way that arrow was set up. So I'm going to go over those things, that the reason that we set these arrows up are for that instance. This is the exact arrow, and I haven't changed it since I shot him. Exact same arrow that I shot him with. It's a grizzly stick. This is the momentum. There's 12 penetrating factors, and grizzly sticks goes out of their way to make those 12 factors in their arrow selection, in their shaft selection, in their broadheads, and the way that they put them together. And I'm going to go through those 12 real quick. And I think this arrow is a perfect one to do. Oh, by the way, this was on the downside of the bull, so he was laying down on top of this arrow. And I'm going to refletch it, and I'm going to actually sharpen this tip, and I'm going to use this arrow again for elk season. This is going to be my lucky arrow. This will be the first arrow in my quiver. That's another testament to why I shoot what I shoot. So the first thing is arrow structure. And so arrow structure, what that means is if the structure holds up. When you shoot an animal, I've shot a lot of different animals, and say like I shot a deer once with an aluminum arrow, and I shot it heavy quartering away. I came in, I hit the front shoulder, it popped like a 22 shell, went down, but the arrow just snaked its way through and bent on the way out, and it was all bent. Each time that bend happens, each time that sticks, you're dissipating energy. So anything that happens to your arrow when it goes in dissipates energy. The bull I shot in 2014, the arrow penetrated all the way, and it stuck out on both sides, and it broke it in the middle. It didn't penetrate. It didn't impede penetration with the arrow structure itself, but it did break, and this one did not break. Now, it did its job. It went all the way through without breaking, got its full penetration without breaking. I'm just saying, when push comes to shove, I didn't hit any heavy bone with that either. I hit lungs. So, you want to use durable equipment. One of the things that I say to use on everything is the ferrules, and an outsert is almost a must to me anymore. I have to have an outsert because I'm afraid this is where all arrows break when they hit something, and the minute that breaks over and crusts, that's probably where you're going to stop penetrating. Whereas like this arrow, it did not stop penetrating there. It hit that ball joint and came out the other end. It made its way through, but if it bust right there. And also, grizzly stick puts a stem back in here that's about that long. So this is a super heavy construction up front. That's what you want in an arrow. You want to make sure that front section is not going to bust on you. That is the first thing that will impede penetration. Second thing that impedes penetration is if you don't have perfect arrow flight. Tune your bows. Tune your bow. Tune your bow. Tune your bow. One of the things that helps my arrow flight, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it later, but is the FOC. FOC does help your arrow flight. People will probably argue this, and people are going to say, no, it doesn't, and this and that. I don't care what they say. If FOC didn't help your arrow flight, they would never make darts with heavy forward weight, right? All the guys that are doing that, making money throwing darts and doing it professionally, always are throwing heavy FOC up front. Same thing. It's all physics. Same thing with an arrow. Next thing is FOC. So FOC is where does that arrow balance? And this is a very high FOC. So where's most of your weight forward of center? Where does it balance forward of center? And this is very high. I think this is a 19% at least FOC. There's a couple different things about FOC. Some people say it's a farce. I'm a believer in it. One, like I said, is you don't have to balance near as much on your back end if you have all of your weight up forward. Another thing is your momentum, the way it carries, and especially with a tapered arrow like the grizzly stick here, all your momentum is in this section. When you hit, you're not gonna wiggle your shaft as bad as, say, with a parallel shaft. And also, the way physics works is all your weight up front is going to pile through there. If you have weight in the back and you hit something, the weight in the back is still going to pile against that shaft, and it's going to bend the shaft, which is going to impede penetration. But if it's all up front, then you're not having to worry about your shaft reacting in the back and impeding penetration. It's physics. I mean, it's that simple. If I had all my weight back here and it hits and stops, that weight's gonna continue to want to move, and the only way it can move is against that shaft. Of course, it's going to push down a little bit more forward as well. But if you have all of it here, then you're not gonna have the shaft trying to continue to push. So that's another reason to have weighted FOC, a high FOC arrow. Another thing is mechanical advantage. This broadhead is a 3-to-1 design, so it's 3 times the length of the width. And what that means is that means that this angle right here is not a very sharp angle. If you climb a hill, what would you rather climb? Would you rather climb a short hill with or a long hill with a shorter angle, or a short hill with a steep angle? Which one would be harder, I should say? The steep angles are always going to be the harder ones to climb. Simmons sharks and things like that are not a penetrating broadhead. They're a good broadhead for if you're trying to get, put something down and put a lot of blood out. Say you're in the brush a lot and you're shooting some weaker animals like a deer or a bear or something like that. But for an elk, man, yeah, people shoot them, people kill them with them. But if you get into that bone, you're not going to get through it. You're not going to get through it. And I know people are like, well, you just don't get in the bone. Well, you know what? If you hunt at any amount of time, or you get into shooting any amount of elk, you're eventually going to get in the bone. The shaft diameter is another thing. And you notice, so compared to like a wood shaft, this is a grizzly stick, wood, and then a regular size. This is a regular size trad only carbon. You can see the differences in shaft diameter. Of course, it just makes sense that a wooden shaft is not going to penetrate near as far because of the diameter of the shaft. Another thing about this shaft is wooden shafts break. And don't get me wrong, wooden shafts have killed every animal on the earth. But I'm just saying that there are advantages out there, and when we have these advantages, that's what we're talking about today. I'm not saying that you can't hunt with any of this stuff or you're not going to kill animals with it. I'm just saying that one's better than the other. So arrow mass is the next thing. So the amount of actual weight that this thing carries is a big deal. The bone threshold that Ashby says is 650 grains, and he does not even put it into how fast the arrow's moving. And the reason is because most all of his shots are, out to 30 yards and under. And so when you're talking 30 yards and under, and you're talking mass, your speeds really don't matter as much as the amount of mass of the arrow does. You could even do it, when you do your momentum calculations, you could go through that and check that out. But mass is where you pick up your momentum. I know a lot of guys shooting arrows like this. This is a 400 grain arrow. This out of my bow is actually going to have more momentum than this out of a fast compound. And then if you add the amount of mechanical advantage that this has over this, you're talking about an arrow that's going to penetrate better and have more killing power to it. The next thing is blade finish. You want to have in your blade finish, you want to have a really nice razor edge. You hear guys talking about their filed edges and all this, and having a little serration there and that. Well, that's all well and good, but really, cut yourself with a razor blade and cut yourself with a steak knife. Which one actually will quit bleeding faster? Shaft profile. Another thing about shaft profile is, if you have a barrel shaft, so a lot of wood arrows, they have their barrel tapered. This is actually tapered in the back, so this is actually helps penetration, but it also helps coming off of your bow. This is a cedar arrow. This is an old Rogue River archery arrow back in the day from Cecil. Cecil used to make these, Paula and Cecil. I still have a few of them, and I used to shoot cedar all the time. That's all I would shoot. But when you look at the shaft, the profile, your heaviest spot should be up front. So when it enters the animal, and then the hole that it made first, that first section, should not impede the rest of your arrow. Now, some arrows are made in barrels, and I don't know why you'd hunt with a barreled arrow, but that would be this side smaller, fatter, and then smaller again, and that would impede penetration. If you look at the grizzly stick shaft, it is heavy forward, and then it's tapered down to very small in the back, and that is that taper helps it penetrate. And I'll tell you what, I think that was one of the saving factors of me getting the elk in 2020. The type of bevel, so this is a single bevel broadhead, and what happens is if you have a single bevel, on contact, it will actually twist. So it'll twist around something or bust it. Whereas a double bevel tends to bury itself into things. So a single bevel will always help penetration, especially in bone. Not a big deal really in flesh and hair, but if you do hit bone, even a rib bone, it's going to twist around that rib bone, and it'll probably break through it and dissipate less energy doing it. And then of course, if you're using just a single blade instead of a triple blade, you're that mechanical advantage that we talked about, you're going to have higher mechanical advantage with these guys. So the tip design of your broadhead, the very tip, Tanto design is the best that has been found. That's the most efficient. And then the arrow mass for heavy bone above 650 grains. Some people argue this because they say that too heavy of an arrow, they can't hit as well, so they're going to impede penetration because they're not as good of a shot with it. And I get that. So, there's a happy medium here, but understand all the physics are the same. So if you shoot a 550 grain arrow and you and your arc's just a little bit flatter, your trajectory is a little bit flatter, that you can carry it out to 45 yards and you don't have to do as much guesswork about what your arrow is going to do, and your pin gaps are better and all those kind of things. If you're doing that and that's the reason you're doing it, that's probably a good thing for you. I'm not going to say anything against it, but the physics are still the same. The heavier the arrow, and with these different things, it's going to help you out a bunch. One of the things I really want to point out, especially with the grizzly sticks, is if you look at them, it's a system that they put together. And I'm putting the same system together because grizzly sticks they're premium arrow. They're premium price as well. So I'm trying to put together as well a less expensive arrow that has some of those same characteristics. Now, it's not going to be on the level of the grizzly stick, of course, but it is using some of the same principle. The cool thing is about grizzly stick is right out of the box, you can take this arrow and you can trust that this has gone through those 12 penetration factors. And especially if you spec it to what those 12 penetration factors are, you're going to have a lot of confidence in your quiver. And that's a big deal, you guys. You guys saw the elk. You guys saw what happened with me. I'm a firm believer in these ideas. So set your arrow up. I don't care what kind you buy. Try to set your arrow up. Even if you're shooting woods, they have wood weights and they have all this stuff that you can do with wood arrows now. Set your arrow up with these principles, and it'll help you out a ton. Hope that helped, guys. This is one of the things with bow hunting that is completely different than rifle hunting, and you have to understand what you're trying to accomplish out there. So if you did get anything out of this, please do me a favor, like and subscribe, pass this on to your friends. It'd be nice to get the word out about what arrows do, and go to Ashby Foundation. They have all of this information down, and they have all of his studies, and you can go check it out for yourself. All right, until then, shoot straight.